At 2:07 a.m., the phone rang like a warning siren in the quiet apartment, slicing through the thin sleep of a man who had learned to rest lightly ever since grief moved in. The screen showed an unknown number, and for a moment he considered letting it die in the dark, but something in his chest tightened, the way it did when his son coughed in the night or when the past whispered too loudly. He answered, heard a breath on the other end, heard a name that wasn't his, and an address spoken as if time itself were running out. The call ended before he could correct the mistake, leaving only the echo of urgency and the strange pull of doing something kind when no one would ever know. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in showing up even when the world has taught you not to, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can find their way into the night. He was a single father by necessity, not choice, the kind of man who packed lunches with careful hands and folded tiny shirts with reverence, because they were all that remained of a life that once felt complete. His days were built on routines that kept the sadness manageable. Work, school pickups, late dinners, whispered prayers that tomorrow would be gentler than yesterday. Money was always tight, time even tighter, and trust was something he rationed carefully. When he slipped on his jacket and checked on his sleeping son, he told himself he was only going to the address to make sure whoever called was safe, that he would correct the mistake and come home. He did not tell himself that he was lonely, or that the night felt heavier than usual, or that sometimes a man shows up because he hopes the universe might notice. The city looked different at that hour, its edges softened by fog and streetlights that hummed like tired guardians. He drove with the windows cracked, breathing in cold air to stay awake, the address pulling him toward a part of town he had only seen on television. The building rose like a glass promise against the sky, a monument to wealth and distance, guarded by silence and security. He expected to be turned away, to feel foolish for believing a wrong call could be a right thing, but the door opened as if it had been waiting for him all along. Inside, the world smelled of polished floors and quiet power. He followed the signs to a private floor where the air felt thinner, where the city glittered like something owned rather than lived in. She stood there, not fragile in the way stories often make the wealthy fragile, but tired in a way money cannot soothe. An heiress by birth and burden, her life had been scheduled since childhood, measured in expectations and headlines, ringed by people who applauded her success while never asking how heavy it felt to carry. The wrong call had been made in a moment of fear, her voice unsteady as she reached for a number saved long ago, a habit from a time when she believed someone would always come. He should have corrected the mistake and left. He should have apologized and returned to his small apartment and the warmth of his son's breath. Instead, he noticed the tremor she tried to hide, the way the room seemed too large for one person to hold together. He stayed because staying felt like the bravest thing he had done in years, and because sometimes the most important choices arrive disguised as errors. The night stretched on, not with grand revelations, but with the quiet unraveling of two lives pressed thin by responsibility. He spoke of fatherhood without romance, of mornings that began before sunrise and nights that ended with exhaustion so deep it felt like peace. He spoke of love lost and found again in a child's laughter, of learning to be enough when the world expects you to be more. She listened with a hunger that surprised her, because no one had ever described a life measured in care rather than conquest. She shared her own struggle without spectacle, the ache of being seen but not known, the loneliness of rooms filled with art that never asked how she was doing. As dawn edged closer, something shifted. The challenge he carried was not just poverty or fatigue, but the fear that stepping into another life would reopen wounds he had stitched closed with discipline. The challenge she carried was the terror of letting someone see her without the armor of status. They navigated these fears without promises, learning that trust can grow in the space between two people who expect nothing and offer presence anyway. He realized that his worth had never been measured by what he lacked, and she realized that staying did not always mean losing control. When the city finally woke, lights spilling across the floor like forgiveness, the decision hovered between them. She asked him to stay, not as a rescuer or a secret, but as a human being who had shown up when the world was quiet and afraid. For him, staying meant rearranging a life already balanced on sacrifice, imagining mornings that included more than survival. It meant confronting the possibility that joy could return without betraying the past. For her, asking meant risking headlines and assumptions, choosing a truth that might never fit neatly into her inheritance. That he thought of his son, of the example he wanted to set, of the lesson that kindness is not a currency, but a compass. He stayed, not because the future was guaranteed, but because the present felt honest. In the days that followed, challenges did not vanish. They multiplied in new forms. Schedules collided, worlds clashed, and whispers followed them like shadows. Yet something steadier took root. He found doors opening not because of her name, but because he learned to believe he belonged on the other side. She found rest in the ordinary rhythms of care, discovering that love could be quiet and still be real. Before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this journey is moving you, if it reminds you that small acts can change entire lives, please pause and comment the word kindness below. Your words help this story travel farther than we ever could alone. In the end, it wasn't the wrong call that changed everything, but the choice to answer with compassion and to stay when leaving would have been easier. The single dad returned home each night to tuck his son in with a lighter heart, carrying stories of a world that no longer felt closed off. The heiress learned to build a life that felt lived rather than displayed, discovering that love does not demand perfection, only presence. And somewhere between glass towers and modest kitchens, two lives learned that mistakes can become miracles when met with courage. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that showing up matters even when no one is watching, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together, we can keep choosing kindness, one answered call at a time.